This episode of Field Notes is sponsored by Birmingham Fastener. Find out how to reduce lead times for your fasteners. Download their free guide today at bhamfast.com/fasteners. Welcome to Field Notes, the monthly podcast of modern steel construction, the monthly magazine of AISC. I'm your host, Jeff Weisenberger, and this month's guest is Jill Lavine, a founding partner with 15 Architecture and Design in Philadelphia. She was also one of the 2025 AISC Ideas 2 Awards judges, so we'll certainly talk about that a bit as well. Jill, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
Excellent. Well, I always say, I like to start from the beginning. Can you tell me where you're from and where you grew up?
Sure can. I love that, starting from the beginning. I am a native of New Jersey. So I grew up in a small town in South Jersey, which is about halfway between where I live now in Philadelphia and like the Jersey Shore. So right in the center of South Jersey, outside of Philadelphia, mostly considered a suburban town bordering on the edge of rural, I would say. Great place to grow up, ran around, ride bikes and doing our thing as kids. It was a good place.
Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people think of, when they think of New Jersey, they think of what's just immediately west of New York. But as you're reminding everybody, there's a whole other state beyond that.
It's it's funny, growing up, I just thought New Jersey was mostly farms and beaches, right. Until I got old enough to understand what North Jersey was, which was more New York. So sure. Yeah, it's two totally different places.
So did you go to college around there? And I got to ask too, did you start off with architecture right from the beginning, or is it something you kind of had to, or is that something you always dreamed about doing?
Yeah, I went to well, yes, I always dreamed about being an architect. So long story short, from as far back as I can remember, I declared at some point that I wanted to be an architect when I was in fourth grade or something. So that really led my trajectory, I would say, on classes I took in high school and colleges I looked at, to go to for professional degrees. And I ended up going to Virginia Tech, which is in Blacksburg, Virginia. So a southwestern part of the state of Virginia. There's not, I was looking for an accredited degree, which, for an architecture degree to practice professionally, you need an accredited degree. And there's not that many accredited degree programs for architecture in the country, let alone in New Jersey. So I sought elsewhere and I ended up going to Virginia Tech. It was an amazing experience. I loved being there. I loved the education. And I started, in the architecture program from my freshman year on. It was a five-year program. And so I graduated with a Bachelor of Architecture, which meant I could go on to get my license without going back for a master's degree. So that was one of the drivers for me too. I just wanted to, get my degree and get my license and go to work. That's my plan.
That's good. That's a good way of doing it. Yeah, I'm not an architect or an engineer myself, but I have talked to a lot of architects where they say, yeah, you basically need a master's. So it's nice when you have a program like that kind of combines it.
Exactly.
You actually have to get a separate one. It sounds like architecture's been, in the cards for a long, long time. So, we talked about, you mentioned maybe around fourth grade. What made that happen? Did you see a certain building somewhere where that made you think, my goodness, this is what I've got to do?
Yeah, I did not really. I've tried to piece this together, honestly, before about why I was so dedicated to the practice of architecture at a very young age. I think I can recall these little details from being a kid. I used to love looking through floor plans in the back of my mom's magazines and stuff. Those country living magazines that they buy a house out of the back. I used to investigate all the floor plans in the back of that magazine. And I remember my dad doing woodworking and stuff. I built a deck in our backyard when I was a kid. And I took all the scrap wood and made these little cityscapes out of it and stuff. I was just really, really into building stuff and urban places and cities. I lived not too far from Philadelphia. So when we would do something fun, we would come into the city to do it. And I just got really, really interested in buildings and cities. And then I mentioned fourth grade. In fourth grade, I had to write a report about what I wanted to be when I grew up, and mine was an architect. I knew that in fourth grade, which I find like amazing. I have kids of my own now, and I'm like, there's no way they have any idea what they want to be in their, around that age. So it's funny that I gravitated toward it at such a young age. But I think I wrote a report about Frank Lloyd Wright, who was, I think, the only architect I had ever heard of at that time.
Sure.
He was it. So so I wrote a book report about it. And then I think as I went on in school, I would do like research papers on like the historic architecture in Philadelphia. And I traveled to Spain with my Spanish class when I was a junior in high school. And that just like opened up my eyes to, architecture of other countries and like the history behind it, the cultural meaning behind all of these amazing things that I was seeing. So it just totally solidified my decision. That was my junior year in high school. So, and that's when I went on the deep search of where I wanted to go to college.
That's great. Yeah. I have to ask, did you go to Barcelona?
Sure. Yeah. Yes, I did. I went to a couple places, Barcelona, Madrid, Sevilla, Cordoba. We went all over.
Do you have like right now, would you say one project that you would point to that could be considered your most memorable in terms of how proud you are of it or how crazy it drove you, or perhaps both? And this is a question I ask of a lot of people because it's a fun one.
It is a fun one.
The answers are always great.
Yeah. So I've been practicing architecture for a pretty long time at this point, going on like 20 years or something. Mm-hmm. And so I've had great experiences on lots of good stuff. The work that I've done has been all over the map, right? Residential scale, small retail stuff, large corporate headquarter type buildings, research facilities, higher ed institutions. But recently, since founding 15, we can talk about that. But
sure.
We have a project here in Philadelphia, and I will say it's like probably the most memorable to date. It's also, it's pretty active right now. It's pretty fresh in my mind. But it's one of the more complex projects that I've ever worked on. Also, the mission behind it is really important to me and to the organization and to the city of Philadelphia. So I would say that's probably my most memorable project. It was a hospital in West Philadelphia, which healthcare was not really like, our main background at 15. We've done plenty of like outpatient primary care facilities and mental and behavioral health facilities. But one of our clients, a long-term client of ours, joined forces with some other healthcare institutions here in Philadelphia and purchased what was Mercy Hospital in West Philadelphia.
Okay.
They purchased it from another entity. And, Philadelphia a few years ago was kind of coming off this wave of hospital closures. There was a hospital in Center City called Hahnemann Hospital that closed, and it was a major blow to the community of Philadelphia, right? Like someplace where you go to receive healthcare closes. It was, it was pretty traumatic for the city. So there was a hospital in West Philadelphia that was going the same route. It was on the verge of closure. And so our client and two partners of theirs, three partners technically, purchased it. And so we've been in the process for, this was like during COVID that we started this project. So it's been 5 years that we've been working on it. And it's been a slow sort of plan to turn that building from like a true single entity hospital to more of a public health and wellness campus.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So it was talk about like, it's huge. It's like a 400,000 square foot facility. It was built in 1915. So as a hospital, that's pretty old. So when it comes to aging infrastructure and things, there's no shortage of stuff to work through. And then the regulatory process of converting a hospital to a public health campus with multiple entities, the complexity there was intense. So I would say memorable in terms of how proud I am of it, definitely, because it's a public health campus in West Philadelphia, a community that desperately needs services. And then challenging because of, all the things I just named: aging, infrastructure, regulatory approvals, multiple healthcare entities coming together in one facility. It was a challenge, no doubt about it. And it's ongoing. I would say it's an operating hospital still, so it's been being undertaken in phases.
Sure.
But it's one that we're really very proud of, and it's been a large part of my professional life over the last 5 years.
Sure. Yeah. No, that's a significant chunk of time. When is it supposed to be completed? Like, when's the final phase?
I would say, well, the final active phase right now is in construction. So right now the building's undergoing some exterior improvements, security, and garage upgrades. Most of the projects that we undertook inside are complete. So it now houses the University of Pennsylvania Hospital System emergency department, among a few other facilities for them. The Children's Hospital here in Philadelphia has a number of floors that have been renovated for their services. And then our client, PHMC, there's a dental clinic there, an outpatient facility, a health and wellness facility that really just provides multiple social services for the community. We've done ADA upgrades and entrance improvements and additions. And so right now it's like the last leg of exterior and security upgrades that we're on right now.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's an immense achievement. And I was whenever I talk to, our architects or engineers, I always like the, kind of the idea or thought of a dream project comes to mind. And this is a good example of how, like, you could say you have a dream project that you came up with that you've had ever since you were a kid or what have you, and maybe it's evolved, that something that you've always wanted to work on. But then in the working world, in the real world, you work, architects work for an owner, et cetera. And so you can also be given a dream project, so to speak, that you didn't really know would be that, but then you take it on, you're like, oh my God, I'm so glad I actually got to be a part of this project.
Yeah. That is definitely how I feel about that one. I mean, the exposure that we've had to the community and just, the learning process around getting things like that approved. And just the complexity of orchestration of infrastructure, and it's been a challenging one, but I think that's the kind of stuff that I love to do. I think that the bigger, the more complex,
for
the
sure,
happier I am.
Yeah, no, I agree. That sounds great. Well, so speaking of 15, let's can you tell me a little bit about the genesis of that firm and also the name?
Yeah. 15 is, so we founded this firm in 2017.
Okay.
It was 4 founding principals that came together to start this company in 2017. We had all worked together previously at a large architecture and engineering firm here in town. By 2017, we had all gone off and gone our separate ways onto other opportunities. But as it turns out, all of us were really looking for something more fulfilling in our professional lives, feeling like we didn't have a voice or the potential for leadership where we were. So we came together in 2017, and the name 15. So there was one of my partners, she was, a friend at the time. She was the sort of center point for all 4 of us. She kind of gathered us together in 2017 and said, hey, I want to start a firm. I'd like you to do it with me. So so her initials are XV, which is 15 in Roman numerals.
Oh yeah, I see. That makes sense because I saw that in your email, in your domain name.
Yes. Yep. XVAD is like our brand.
Sure.
It's very. Yeah, so that's how the name came about. So she was the originator, I guess, of the idea, like, let's do this together. She collected myself and 2 other women to create the 4 founding partners of 15. And so yeah, we kind of at that time identified that there were just so few women in leadership positions in architecture firms in Philadelphia, and I think everywhere. Maybe I don't know, at the time, we did our research at the time, and I can't remember all the data, but maybe there were 2% of the firms in Philadelphia that were women owned, maybe. Wow. Out of like 500 plus.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
And like, I don't know if any of them, maybe one of them was like fully women owned, So we decided that, that data was unacceptable. So we decided to go for it together. So we were, founded by 4 women. We have 5 partners now, and one of whom is a man. People sometimes say like, "Oh, are men allowed in your club?" I'm like, of course they are. Just how it went at the time. But we've grown from a team of 4 to a team. We have 18 full-time folks, and we're a very collaborative group. We have a network of collaborators who support our work, and we're when we count the whole group, it's about 30 folks.
Okay.
So our goal really was and continues to be to provide a culture where everyone's voice matters, and women don't feel like they have to leave the profession to be able to support their families. We're a very flexible environment here at 15, and we're doing our part to support our community through design and making a name for ourselves as a firm who works with clients to help them realize their vision through partnership, collaboration, co-creation. We've really been building this thing. It's been ever evolving since 2017, but it's been great so far.
No, that's excellent. Well, yeah, it's great. I've heard my fair share of origin stories, so to speak, for firms, but that's a very unique twist to it. And I like what your idea of like kind of changing the numbers a little bit. Like you said, 2%. You're just one firm, but still you're pushing things in the right direction. So that's good to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're working on really cool projects.
We are. Yes, we are.
So in that vein, I was going to say, I understand that you head up the sustainability and building performance side of things there. I'm just curious, how did you get to that point? Was this like always kind of like, was sustainability and always a passion of yours?
I wouldn't say it has always been, but I mentioned, I think that, the 4 founding partners of 15, we came from a large firm here in Philly. So I was at another firm when I first moved to Philadelphia. I was there for about 11 years. I worked at this other firm, and it was architecture and engineering integrated together. So our project work was, hand in hand, step by step with the engineers in that location at the Philadelphia office that I was at. So I think, it wasn't really until I moved to Philadelphia and sort of learned about, from the engineers that I was working with, I learned a lot about systems and system efficiency and renewable energy. And I was also taught by a few individuals at that firm who were really early adopters of lean and sustainability and very passionate about it. So it was an integral part of our project work when I was there. And I think I'm someone, I think, who loves to get into the details and evaluating scenarios, and just I got into it at that time. During my years there, I was able to work on a couple of great sustainable buildings, LEED Gold, corporate headquarters around this region, and I became very interested in the details, providing efficient envelope systems that are, going to make our buildings more energy efficient, and renewable energy scenarios. And I was exposed to a lot of it there, and it's just become something that I've just maintained interest in. So when we started 15, and nowadays there's so much that we can do. There's so many tools and analyses that we can do, and we have another one of our team members here at 15 who's really helping to push us forward now. So it's become a really big focus for our firm, and it takes a village, as they say. So there's just so many tools out there. It takes folks that are dedicated to focusing on it, and we're lucky to have those folks here on our team to help drive us forward.
Yeah, no, that's wonderful to hear. And it's funny, I've been to, Green Build it's been a while since I've been, but I used to go, especially when it was kind of getting going. And it's just interesting how that language has changed. It went from like green to sustainable to resilient to
Right.
performance. And really, it's like whatever, whatever your goal is for it, like at the end of the day, even somebody where sustainability might not be such a top goal. Well, performance is, because it means, more efficient and
sure.
Like
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Resilient is a very current word.
Oh, for sure.
Also, for obvious reasons, right? Like all the things that we see out in the world today, like having, building resiliently, longer life, more efficiency for our buildings, for our clients, the better off we are.
You were one of our Ideas 2 Awards judges this year. Thank you, by the way, for being on that panel. I'm curious, what was your experience like? I mean, and I've been on the jury a couple times, and sometimes it's very civil and everybody agrees, and other times people have to almost like nobody fights, nobody throws anything, but like people that really start advocating for what kind of like their favorite project. Can you maybe give me a general overview of your whole experience?
That's very funny to hear you say that. I think they mentioned that, right? Some years I'm sorry, there is some background noise here. There's a fire truck coming down my street. Can you hear that?
I can't.
Okay. Sorry, I lost my train. So the idea is, I think they mentioned that when we arrived in Chicago, like, this could be super smooth. You guys could be done in 2 hours, or you're really going to fight it out and it's going to take all day. So my experience was very cordial. So we had a really amazing group of folks that day. I really had so much fun. I flew to Chicago and stayed one night and got to hang out in your headquarters there for the day. I think I was blown away by the work that was submitted. I just had so much fun reviewing the projects in advance. And again, like I get like really into the details. So I was really interested in like, the engineering behind a lot of the stuff that we saw, the complexity and the coordination that I had to imagine had to take place during construction. I got really excited about it. So I was ready to go and prepared. I thought I had my top 3 I was going to put forward for whatever, all the different categories. And I think what I was most taken by was the fact, I was an architect, or I am an architect. There was another architect from AISC who was on the jury.
Yeah.
Yep. And then there was a structural engineer, and then there was a CMGC, and then a steel fabricator, right? So there were like all these different perspectives at the table. And I went into it thinking like, oh, well, this is a clear winner. This is definitely like, But then what I was blown away by was when I heard someone else's perspective about why they chose that, right? Like the CM, he had a favorite project because of like, the complexity of the coordination and the staging and the phasing of how it had to be built. And then the steel fabricator had a different position because of the like iconography around one of the steel projects that was put forward. Just like, it really like put, steel in the best light and sort of represented the history behind steel construction. And the structural engineer obviously was most taken by the one that had like the craziest engineering. And, I was so fascinated to hear everyone's perspective. And we debated a little bit, but, and we couldn't come to full agreement on everything. So, we had to take some votes, and we even created, I think, like a new category this year because there was one project that we felt was like in a league of its own that had to get a special award. So it was amazing. It was a great experience for me. And as a matter of fact, we were talking about a project here in our office a couple weeks ago. We do these like design sprints, which is a little charrette around a particular topic, and we have a project that we're talking about right now, and I referenced one of the submissions.
Cool.
It really stuck with me, and I actually, it was the one that we did a little recording at the end. It was the one that I got to talk about, and it was so like the things that I loved about that project. It was so relevant to what we were discussing here in the office just a couple weeks ago. So, yeah, it really stuck with me what I learned there. It was a great time.
I'm glad to hear it. Well, that wraps up another edition of Field Notes. Again, I'm your host, Jeff Weisenberger, and our guest this month was Jill Lavine with 15 Architecture and Design in Philadelphia. Thanks for listening, everyone. Take care. Once again, this episode of Field Notes has been sponsored by Birmingham Fastener.